I'm Edie Lush, and I'm here at Hub Culture in the Davos Pavilion, and I'm delighted to be joined by Kumi Naidoo. He's the Executive Director of Greenpeace. Thanks for coming here on Climate Deal Day.
Thank you for having me.
Tell me why you're here in Davos.
Well, Greenpeace is extremely concerned that time is running out, that the science suggests that we have to get government, business, and civil society to really pick up the pace of moving towards a new green economy where we can reduce emissions and where we can actually have the kinds of impacts that we need. And businesses are a central part of the problem at the moment, but they can be part of the solution. Some businesses here are beginning to do the right thing. We are here to add our voice of encouragement and pressure to ensure that the business community understands that it cannot be business as usual, and that the longer they delay taking action, they actually put their own businesses at risk on the one hand, but also they lose opportunity on the other. Because if we look at China, they're moving ahead. China now is the biggest investor in renewable technologies, and China is very clear that they're going to make renewable technologies part of consolidating their economic strength in the future. So it's the right thing for businesses to do. It's the business thing for business to do, and we are here to bring those messages.
It's interesting that you're talking about that. We had Peter Lacey from Accenture in this morning, and he was responsible for a report done for the United Nations, in fact, for the Secretary General. And interestingly, over 90% of CEOs say they know that sustainability has to be part of their business plan going forward. But what are the key things that you would say businesses need to do? What are the things that they need to take action on in terms of climate change, in terms of making their business more sustainable? What would you point to?
Well, first they need to ensure that they are doing no harm to the environment. They need to look at their own carbon footprint, and they need to look at how they can make their own businesses and business processes operate in a way that is least carbon intensive as possible. Secondly, they need to recognize that they have power, and they use this power to lobby governments, powerful governments, for very specific things that advances their businesses. Now they need to use that power to actually push governments, particularly in places like the United States, where the political process is stuck with regard to climate legislation, to say that businesses want clarity. They want regulatory clarity so they can make the big choices that they need to redesign and reconfigure the business for the 21st century.
I'm interested in that you mentioned the United States and how climate legislation has gotten stuck. We've seen Copenhagen, Cancun. We see countries trying to move on, some of them accepting and putting into place climate legislation, some of them, as you say, getting stuck. How is Greenpeace changing what it's saying about what countries should be doing in terms of where they should be going and the kind of legislation they should be putting through?
Well, generally we're calling for a fair, ambitious and legally binding treaty at the global level. That's what the world needs. That's what governments agreed 3 years ago in Bali at COP13, that we needed to do. We are nowhere near that at the moment. What Cancun did was it did not save the planet or save the climate. What it did was it saved the process. So it recovered from Copenhagen and it got it back on stream within the UN negotiating process. What we need from Durban now is to have much higher levels of ambition with regard to resources for poor country to ensure that they can adapt and mitigate the impacts of climate change, but importantly, to enable them not to follow the dirty energy pathway that developed countries pursue to develop their economies. We also need to ensure that the level of ambition on cuts, on deforestation and so on, are not simply baby steps in the right direction, but they should be at the same level of ambition that the science tells us we need to be. So on emissions cuts, the science is crystal clear that by 2020, we should be looking at cuts between 25 and 40% in developed countries. We are far away from that. I mean, the US offered in Copenhagen 4% in effect. And so we are going to be bringing pressure to create a momentum at the next COP, which is in Durban, which happens to be my birth, where I grew up. And,
so good for you.
Yeah, I had nothing to do with it. But what we want to do is build the broadest, strongest alliance of civil society, working more closely with trade unions, more closely with faith groups on the one hand, and then also beginning to work with local governments and parliamentarians. Because in the global negotiating processes of the UN, interestingly, parliamentarians and local government officials, even though they are the directly elected expressions of democracy, have virtually no voice. And in fact, civil society and certainly business have much more power in these UN processes. So we're wanting to bring, so for example, in Europe, we're trying to get the European Union as soon as possible to commit to 30% emissions reductions by 2020.
And where are they now? Just remind me.
They've committed to 20%.
Right.
But importantly, the European Parliament in November passed a resolution committing to 30%. And they said, we should do this irrespective of what other countries do, because not only it's the right thing to do, but also because it is what will enable Europe to be competitive in a new green economy in the future. And if we delay, then actually we will be behind the curve of sort of a green development pathway.
Kumi, it's been fascinating speaking to you. Thanks very much for taking the time to come into the Hub Culture here in Davos. And I'm Edie Lush.